So for our next session, we've got an amazing speaker who will explore how Islamophobia and institutional racism continues to impact the third sector, particularly how structural barriers continue to impede upon a charity's ability to equitably help vulnerable communities. Please let us put our hands together to Runnymede Trust CEO, Dr. Shabna Begum.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So the title that I was given for this session is Challenging Biases and Building Unity. And I've got to be quite honest that title has weighed heavily on me, because I think that we are living through times which are incredibly difficult for us to grapple with. The burden of that title has made me struggle with, do I give something that's glib and glossy and talk about all the optimistic and positive things that there inevitably are? Or do I focus on some of the catastrophic violence that we see in the world around us and the implications it has for us here in the UK? And for me, it would be a disservice to ignore all of those wider issues and to talk to this title without bringing in that wider context. None of us are ignorant of the catastrophic violence that is happening in Gaza, the deliberate starvation of people, the assault on people queuing to get food for their starving families. And we are all shameful witnesses to that, whether it's on our mobile phones or on our TV screens. The Runnymede Trust last year published a report which we called Islamophobia, the Intensification of Racism Toward Muslims in the UK. And in that, we connected the anti-Palestinian racism, the genocide in Gaza, to what is happening to Muslim communities here in the UK. We have seen an incredible rise in hate crimes toward Muslims. We saw the racist riot last year, where misinformation led to neighbours turning on their Muslim community. We saw mosques attacked. We saw cemeteries desecrated. And we've seen the increasing normalisation of Islamophobia in our mainstream politics and in our mainstream media. And whether that is GB News or the green benches of Parliament, all of us are subjected to this hatred. And for me, therefore, it's been incredibly difficult to think about how we build unity when the political environment feels so challenging. And yet, just less than 2 weeks ago, I think, I was startled back to hope. And I was startled back to hope because in all the bleakness and in all the gloom and in all the violence that we are witnessing, we saw a young Muslim man in New York City win the Democratic nomination and candidacy to become the Mayor of New York later on in November. And I think that all of us would have been astounded at that victory because he came out of the blue. He is a 33-year-old man who arrived from Uganda as a 7-year-old. He was a migrant. He is South Asian. He is Muslim. He doesn't hide any of that. And yet, he was able to run this incredible campaign where he galvanized New York against all the odds. It was the most epic victory. We are talking about a candidate who went up not just against the wider hostile political environment, he went up against the Democratic Party machinery. He was not the preferred candidate, and yet he won. And so, in terms of building unity, I wanted to speak to the 3 things that I think he did in his campaign that all of us here need to learn from. And I think the 3 things that came from his campaign, for me, were the value of building solidarity, the perils of remaining silent, and finally, the real urgency of building creative connection with our audiences. So I'll start with the values of solidarity. He is a Muslim man. He's a young man, but he didn't make his identity the centre of his politics. He was able to campaign on issues which mobilised everyone. He talked about all New Yorkers. He wasn't talking about winning competitive gains for one community against another. He was able to build a campaign which appealed to the broadest constituency. He spoke about freezing rents. He spoke about fast, free buses. He spoke about a department for community safety. He spoke about no-cost childcare. And he talked about city-owned grocery stores. These are incredible left-leaning, progressive political policy pledges. And he was able to mobilise people around them, not because he was arguing that they were going to be given as gifts to particular communities. He was able to project the benefit that everyone would enjoy from those achievements. And that's what we have to learn as well. I think that we in our sectors, and I know that Runnymede Trust sits slightly adjacent to lots of the organisations here, but similar to you, we often operate in silos. We often are arguing for our own individual benefits and the protection of our communities. And that can exceptionalise and make it appear as though what we are competing for is a self-interest, it's a selfish gain that we want, or a selfish protection. But actually, what he promised and what he was able to do was to show that where you are challenging discrimination, where you are challenging the housing system, and where you are challenging the transport system, which has simply become unaffordable for everyday New Yorkers, actually you are not promising benefits for individuals. You are promising a benefit that everyone will benefit from and will share. And I think that all of us need to learn that what he did was reinvent and revive the idea of the social contract, that actually all of our work is about rebuilding the social contract, the wider fabric of our social system. And so he was able to really capitalise on building this solidarity across all New Yorkers. The other thing that he did was that he refused to remain silent. He didn't stay silent on Palestine. He used the word genocide. He has condemned the Israeli government, and he embraced his Muslim identity. And I know that many of us in our sectors, as leaders of our organisations, we are often struggling with how much do we foreground those identities? How much do we talk about these issues? And is it going to be detrimental to our work? Is it going to be detrimental to our reputation? And certainly at the Runnymede Trust, and I know our friends in the Muslim charity sector, we have faced an onslaught of a political culture and a political conversation which has wanted us to be silent, which has had us speak in whispers and try to shut down the work that we do. And so in that context, it can feel prudent, right? It can feel prudent to stay quiet, to work in the shadows, and to really aggressively think about our risk assessment on what we say and what we do. And we refrain from speaking on things that we are scared might get us into trouble with the charity infrastructure. And yet, what Zoran Mamdani showed was that actually you can win using that honesty. He was not silent. And so it is really important. And for us today, Runnymede Trust put out a statement about the prescription of Palestine action. How is it that we can live in a world where we can see a genocide unfold on our screens, and yet people who are using direct action tactics here in the UK are prescribed and described as terrorists? It is important that we don't cede the ground to the right wing and people who would normalise that kind of idea that that behaviour has to be prescribed and is terrorist behaviour, and that the behaviour that we see on our screens every day for months on end is acceptable and normalised. So we must not be silent. We lose our morality, we lose our credibility, and we lose our charitable purpose if we do not speak on the issues that are direct to our charities. And so I'm not obviously saying for any of us to operate outside of our charitable objects, but I would argue that we need to make sure that we don't use the culture of fear that has been generated against us to stay silent on the issues that matter to our communities. The final thing I wanted to talk about his campaign was how beautifully he executed that campaign. Now, if none of you have seen some of the campaign videos that he ran not just on these really important messages. He ran a really stylish campaign. He appealed to younger voters. He ran with such excitement and energy, and it felt so fresh and new because our political conversation has become so stale. We have a political conversation which has traded on fear, on hatred, on despair. And those are easy things to trade on, particularly here in the UK. We've had decades of austerity. We've had communities stripped of all the resources that they need to survive, let alone to thrive. And he ran a campaign that addressed those issues, but addressed those issues in a way that translated to different audiences. He didn't talk in just cheap gimmick politics. He ran his campaign with integrity and with honesty. And he didn't just run his campaign online. He did that beautifully. He did that stylishly. But he was also very present in his community, which is, again, a lesson for us. How do we speak to audiences that excite them, that engage with them, that speak to them on terms that they find engaging and accessible? How do we meet our communities in person? And I think that, again, the far right have done this far better than us. The far right speak on terms where they will nourish the hatred, the fear, the despair that people are feeling. It is easy to trade on those emotions. It's harder to craft and curate messages of hope, of excitement. And it is harder to speak to people, to convince them that actually the political system is designed for them. It is not there to abuse them, because fundamentally, for the past few years, all we have seen is politicians abuse the system. And frankly, of course, the default is going to be to distrust and feel disillusioned with that system. I don't know if you saw it, but he ran a campaign where he talked about the ranking system that they use for the mayoral election. And I was a politics teacher before I became to Runnymede Trust. He explained the ranking system using glasses of mango lassi, okay? So he taught the ranking system to his constituents in a way that was accessible to them. So again, I say to us, how many of our organisations are speaking to our communities and bringing people in? How many of us are speaking to the hope and the excitement that we should be encouraging and nurturing? In his speech, in his victory speech, Zohran Mamdani said, he quoted, "It always seems impossible until it is done." And that was Nelson Mandela. And so I say to us, yes, it feels bleak, it feels gloomy. There are so many fronts on which we have to fight these battles. But whilst it might seem impossible, as Mamdani has proven, it is possible, and it can and must be done.